They tore through our fence like it was nothing more than trash waiting for pickup. I was still half awake, hair sticking every which way, and there they were, 3 men in matching polos, acting like they ruled the street. Wood chips flew while some clipboard-wielding boss shouted commands. No warning, no paperwork, just raw audacity at 8 a.m. My stomach sank because this wasn't just a neighborhood squabble. It felt darker, like they were performing for a camera or testing our limits. Tell me in the comments, would you have stepped outside or just called the cops? I was grading American history papers when the roar of a chainsaw erupted outside my window 8 a.m. sharp on a Tuesday, and someone was attacking our gate with power tools. I'm Daniel Martin, 28, a high school history teacher, living with my grandpa Walter on land our family has owned since the 1970s. The wooden gate Grandpa built in 1983 had survived 4 decades of storms, yet apparently it wouldn't withstand what was happening now. I dropped my red pen and bolted to the front door, still in yesterday's coffee-stained shirt, wondering what kind of crisis justified destroying a fence before most people had even finished their morning cup. Looking back, I should have realized that actual authorities don't show up at dawn armed with chainsaws. 3 men were at our gate wearing matching polo shirts stitched with HOA patrol. The largest handled the chainsaw, wood chips spraying everywhere, while a clipboard manager barked orders. The third, maybe 22, had a GoPro strapped to his shoulder, recording as if this were a reality TV segment. None of them looked like they belonged in our peaceful neighborhood or had any right to be cutting down our fence. Seriously, who arrives at dawn with power tools and zero explanation? The whole scene was surreal, like stepping into someone else's nightmare. I wasn't sure if I was overreacting, but their behavior screamed wrong. "Stop! What are you doing?" I yelled over the chainsaw, my voice barely carrying above the mechanical roar. "Where's your security license? Are you bonded?" The clipboard guy turned with a smug smirk, like I'd interrupted his important work. "We don't need licenses for community enforcement," he said, not bothering to show any ID alarm bells went off in my head. "Real security firms carry badges, licenses, insurance. These guys had only polo shirts and arrogance." The chainsaw continued its deafening hum, but one thing became painfully clear. Legitimate personnel don't destroy property first and explain later. I wish I could say I stayed calm, but honestly, who wouldn't snap at that level of nerve? "Show me the violation notice," I demanded, checking our mailbox, which was empty. No warnings, no letters, no documentation. You skipped every legal step. The clipboard manager laughed like I'd told a joke. "We don't need paperwork." "For safety violations," he said, gesturing at our pristine fence. Safety violations? I'd been teaching American history for 6 years, and I knew basic procedure. You can't just destroy someone's property on a whim. There's due process, written notices, appeals, formal steps, but these men acted like the Constitution was optional. Maybe I should have walked away, but their blatant disregard for rights made my blood boil. I kept demanding permits while they threatened to call the police for obstruction. Can you imagine? They're destroying my family's fence with chainsaws and I'm the one obstructing justice? The absurdity hit me like a punch. One phone call and they could have labeled my 82-year-old grandpa a troublemaker for defending our land. That's when it clicked. This wasn't normal HOA enforcement. Legitimate associations follow rules, submit paperwork, respect rights. These guys operated outside the system, hiding behind official-sounding titles and fake authority. But they picked the wrong family to intimidate. I didn't know what we could do against people who ignored rules entirely, but we couldn't just let them destroy our fence. The chainsaw operator finally cut through the main support beam of our gate, and our beautiful wooden fence crashed to the ground with a deafening crack that echoed through the neighborhood. 40 years of craftsmanship obliterated in about 3 minutes by men who couldn't even produce a business license. Watching it fall, I felt something inside me shatter. Not just anger, but deep grief for something irreplaceable. At that moment, Walter stepped onto the porch, coffee cup in hand, eyes sharp from a life that had seen real combat at Quezon. He didn't speak. He set the cup down on the porch rail and walked into the shed. I heard the scraping of metal across wood and concrete, and my stomach tightened. I knew exactly what he was retrieving. When Walter emerged, he carried the belt-fed M60 machine gun he'd brought home from Vietnam, tripod and ammunition belt in tow. The three fake patrol members went pale as he set it on the porch table, morning sun glinting off the barrel. "Just having coffee on my own land," he said quietly, settling into his chair like this was completely normal. The silence that followed was electric. No more chainsaw roaring, no more yelling. Just three guys in polo shirts staring at a weapon they'd only ever seen in films. Walter sipped his coffee as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The balance of power had flipped entirely in less than a minute. Across the street, Mrs. Patterson was recording on her phone, probably posting it to that neighborhood watch page she never stops talking about. The kid, with the GoPro, hadn't shut off his camera either, still capturing everything that was unfolding. I noticed their shirts lacked any official badges or ID numbers, only generic embroidery that could have been printed at any strip mall. Were these actually security officers or just thieves in disguise? The clipboard-holding guy began edging toward their truck, suddenly eager to leave. "We'll be back with proper authorities," he said, trying to sound intimidating but failing miserably. Walter simply nodded and took another sip of coffee. "Looking forward to meeting some real authorities," he replied. I had to pause and stare at him after that. The three men packed up their gear faster than anyone I'd ever seen, tossing the chainsaw into their truck bed and speeding off without another word. Yet the way they kept glancing back at our house made it clear this wasn't finished. I stood in the quiet morning, staring at our ruined gate and wondering what we had gotten ourselves into. Walter finished his coffee and began inspecting the damage, running his fingers over the cut wood as if he were assessing casualties on a battlefield. "Daniel," he said at last, "real authorities would have had paperwork. These guys came toe-steal. Something. Steal something." I looked at our modest home, clueless as to what anyone could want from it. I didn't know if this was just amateur hour or if they'd been planning something bigger all along. Turns out Chase, the kid with the GoPro, had been live streaming the entire scene to his personal social media account, hoping for viral content. Instead, he captured the most explosive neighborhood confrontation anyone had seen in years: Mrs. Patterson's. Phone footage combined with Chase's high-quality video, creating a perfect storm of online drama that spread faster than I could follow. Within 3 hours, the clips had tens of thousands of views and climbing. I wasn't sure what I'd expected from social media, but it definitely wasn't this kind of instant notoriety. Looking back, maybe I should have realized that an 82-year-old Vietnam veteran facing off with mysterious security carrying a belt-fed machine gun would grab attention like wildfire. The edited clips made Walter seem far more dangerous and threatening than he really was, cutting out the part where he never aimed the weapon at anyone or made threats. Public opinion split right down the middle, like a political debate comment. Sections turning into battlegrounds. Half the comments screamed about a dangerous old man with a weapon, while the other half defended him with "fake security destroys fence." I saw one particularly venomous comment that said, "You and that crazy old man will pay for this." And honestly, it made my chest tighten with fury. Crazy old man. This man had served his country in combat, while these keyboard warriors probably never faced anything worse than a traffic ticket. But that's the internet. Everyone's an expert on situations they've never experienced. I wasn't sure if I was overreacting to the criticism, but some threats felt genuinely scary. My email inbox flooded with hundreds of messages from reporters, interview requests, and unfortunately, threatening notes from people who'd never met us but had strong opinions about guns and self-defense. News vans started appearing on our street like ants at a picnic, satellite dishes and camera crews turning our quiet neighborhood into a media circus better suited for television than real life. I wasn't ready for this level of attention, and honestly, it terrified me more than the fake security patrol had. Walter remained calm through it all, only saying, "Daniel, they're running scared now. We need to be patient." Patient? With reporters knocking every hour and neighbors complaining about the media circus disrupting their daily lives, I wasn't sure how much patience I had left. That's when I decided to research HOA procedures online, reasoning that knowledge was better than confusion in this rapidly escalating situation. What I found made my stomach churn and my hands shake with anger. real homeowner associations must provide. 30-day written notice before any enforcement action, followed by appeals hearings and court orders for seizure. None of these procedures had been followed in our situation. There were no violation notices in any municipal records, no scheduled hearings, no documentation of any kind. Either our local HOA was utterly incompetent or something else entirely was going on, something that had nothing to do with normal community management. I began printing out state regulations, assembling a file like I was preparing for a court case. Maybe I was overreacting, but seeing fake security tear down fences felt like a battle worth fighting with every resource available. The HOA office convened an emergency meeting as phones rang nonstop with media inquiries and furious residents, demanding explanations for the morning's chaos. Deborah Richardson, the HOA president, with her perfectly styled blonde bob, appeared for the first time since the ordeal began, her face red with anger over the negative attention her organization had received. She looked exactly like every HOA president I'd ever imagined, armed with clipboards, regulations, and a relentless desire to control other people's yards. Chase was pressured to remove his original video, but it was far too late to contain the fallout. The clips had already been mirrored and shared widely, creating an enduring record of their questionable actions that no amount of corporate spin could erase. Technology works both ways, it seemed, and sometimes it favors ordinary people instead of institutions. But what really caught my attention and made me realize this was bigger than mere incompetence was what Chase had secretly saved. The full-length original video showing the patrol discussing their plan before they started cutting our fence. The footage included clear dialogue about handling resistance from homeowners and avoiding complications like experienced thieves planning a heist. I'm no lawyer, but even I recognized scheming when I heard it in high-definition video. The beat weren't confused about procedure or making honest mistakes. They were deliberately violating our rights, orchestrating the operation in advance, fully aware of its dubious legality. The question was, why and who was behind this fake enforcement? Scheme that seemed too sophisticated for simple neighborhood bullying? I spent hours analyzing Chase's footage frame by frame, hunting for clues about their true motives. Their truck had no logos, their shirts were generic, and their equipment looked rented, not professionally owned. Every detail suggested temporary actors playing a role rather than actual security personnel. Walter joined me at the computer, scrutinizing the footage with the same intensity he probably had analyzing enemy movements in Vietnam. "Daniel," he said after watching the conspiracy conversation 3 times, "these boys are working for someone else. The question is who and what do they actually want from our fence?" Media coverage escalated through the afternoon, with national outlets picking up the story and spinning it in various political directions. Some portrayed Walter as a dangerous vigilante, others as a patriotic defender of individual rights. I watched our quiet family dispute transform into a nationwide debate about self-defense, gun ownership, and the limits of community authority. Chase's conspiracy footage hadn't been released yet, but I could feel it simmering like a secret weapon in our hands. When the moment was right, it would reveal the true masterminds behind this elaborate plan. But first, we needed to determine who was pulling the strings and why they wanted our fence destroyed badly enough to risk fraud and conspiracy charges. Something about their panicked reaction suggested we had stumbled onto something much bigger. 2 days after the chainsaw incident, they returned, but this time it was different. No power tools, no dawn ambush. Deborah Richardson herself led a group of official-looking people in black suits down our driveway, like some grim corporate procession. I watched them from the kitchen window while making breakfast, my stomach tight with anxiety over what new nightmare they had concocted. Walter sat at the table reading his newspaper, appearing calm, though I noticed his coffee cup trembled slightly. Even seasoned veterans get uneasy when an adversary changes tactics. I debated whether to call the police preemptively or wait to see what authority they would claim this time. Deborah knocked on our front door with the confidence of someone certain they had every right to be there, flanked by 2 men who looked like they had walked straight out of a government building. She wore a crisp business suit and carried a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my monthly salary, projecting an air of official authority the polo-shirted patrol had entirely lacked. "Mr. Martin," she said when I answered. "We need to discuss the immediate surrender of that unregistered weapon your grandfather displayed during yesterday's incident." "Unregistered weapon?" I felt my face heat with anger at the accusation, but kept my tone steady. "Mom, that's a legally owned war relic. My grandfather has all the proper documentation, and it never left his private property," Walter stepped in behind me before I could say anything further that might escalate the situation. "War relic. Legally owned, staying on private land," he said, his calm voice somehow carrying more authority than all of Deborah's corporate posturing. She straightened and pulled a folder from her briefcase as if preparing to serve official papers. "We have authority to confiscate dangerous items that threaten community safety," she declared, though her tone suggested she wasn't as confident as she hoped. I studied the two men beside her, searching for badges or identification to give weight to her claims. "Show me your law enforcement credentials," I said, my teacher instincts kicking in. "Show me a warrant." The silence that followed spoke volumes about their non-existent authority. No badges appeared, no documents were produced, just uncomfortable shuffling and exchanged glances. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because the absurdity had reached a level beyond rational response. "You people don't have any authority at all, do you?" I asked, and Deborah's reddened face confirmed my suspicion. Walter invited them to sit on our porch furniture, maintaining polite Southern hospitality while making it clear his weapon would remain exactly where it was. "You have no badge, no warrant, no legal authority," he stated plainly. "This is still private property here in the United States." After they left, clearly frustrated and empty-handed, I felt compelled to dig deeper into what was really unfolding in our neighborhood. That afternoon's visit to City Hall quickly turned into a crash course on just how far some people will go to masquerade as officials when they have a major scheme in motion. Janet, a friendly clerk who had been at City Hall for 20 years, pulled up records that sent a chill down my spine. "Haw Patrol isn't a licensed security company," she explained, typing rapidly at her computer. "Actually, there's no business registered under that name anywhere in our county database. They have no standing here at all, just as I suspected. If they weren't a legitimate security firm, then what were they? And why were they so determined to tear down our fence?" The answer arrived in an anonymous text while I was driving home. "Check Pinnacle development permits. Follow the money." My hands trembled as I read the message. The words hinted at a conspiracy that went far beyond neighborhood squabbles or petty HOA power plays. I pulled into a parking lot and began sifting through public records on my phone, following a digital trail that quickly led to alarming findings. Pinnacle Development had submitted building permits for a massive project called the Sunset Ridge Project. The plans included widening the road that ran right past our home. The route they designated for construction access required clearing obstacles along the existing road, including anything that could block heavy machinery. Our fence gate was located precisely at the bottleneck they planned to clear. Suddenly, everything fell into place in the most infuriating way imaginable. This wasn't some routine HOA enforcement. It was a corporate land grab using fabricated authority to remove obstacles for a development project. Sitting in my car, scanning permit applications and blueprints, I felt nauseous as the pattern became unmistakable. Multiple homes along the proposed route had experienced similar confrontations with the same fake patrol, all conveniently positioned where Pinnacle needed unobstructed access for their equipment. We weren't dealing with overzealous neighbors or mismanaged community governance. This was organized fraud designed to strip families of their rights for corporate profit. The scale of the scheme was staggering, both in its audacity and in its careful planning. Pinnacle had constructed an entire faux enforcement operation, complete with uniforms and official-sounding titles, to bypass proper acquisition procedures that would have cost them millions in purchases or legal battles. Rather than navigating eminent domain laws or negotiating fair compensation, they opted to seize what they wanted through intimidation and false claims of authority. I drove home, my mind racing to process the implications of what I had uncovered. How many families had already been victimized? How long had this operated unnoticed by legitimate law enforcement? Walter was on the porch when I arrived, keeping watch with his coffee and his ever-present constitutional deterrent. Now I understood why his instincts, honed by military service, had been so sharply triggered. "Grandpa," I said, showing him the permit documents on my phone. "It's not about our fence. It's corporate theft disguised as neighborhood enforcement." He examined the construction plans with the same meticulous care he once used to track enemy movements in Vietnam, nodding slowly as the pattern crystallized. "These people aren't just confused or overzealous," he said finally. "They're professional thieves using fake badges to steal land rights. That changes everything about how we handle their next move." "Pinnacle development," I muttered, wondering if we could even challenge fraud this massive and coordinated. That evening, Walter called me to the kitchen table as he cleaned his M60, a ritual of weapon maintenance that served both practical and meditative purposes. I'd never seen him handle the gun with such deliberate focus, inspecting every piece as if preparing for combat rather than deterring a phony security squad. The belt-fed weapon gleamed under our kitchen lights, a relic from a war fought for. Principles that now felt eerily relevant. "Daniel," he said without looking up, "we need to talk about confronting thieves hiding behind fake badges. This isn't like dealing with ordinary disagreements." I wanted to call a lawyer immediately, convinced that legal action was the best way to stop Pinnacle's sophisticated, well-organized scheme. "We need to go through the courts," I insisted. Walter shook his head, calm and patient, shaped by decades of combat experience. "The law works when both sides respect it," he said, running a cleaning rod through the barrel. "These people are thieves operating outside the law. Lawyers and paperwork won't stop them. They don't care about the rules." His words unsettled me, hinting at a conflict I wasn't ready for, yet I couldn't deny their logic. How do you fight fraud when the perpetrators reject authority entirely? He shared lessons from Vietnam, enemy tactics involving fake uniforms, psychological tricks meant to sow doubt while attackers advanced through deception. The parallel to our situation was chillingly clear. "This gun represents what we fought for," he continued, "the right to defend your land when thieves ignore boundaries." As he worked methodically, I spread out the documents I had gathered, building permits, land purchase records, zoning applications, all bearing signatures that made my hands shake as I connected the dots. These weren't random incidents. They were premeditated maneuvers in a corporate land grab planned months in advance. Pinnacle's permits went back 6 months, all related to road widening that required clearing structural obstacles along our exact street. The signatures on several. Documents aligned, linking city officials to the development company in ways that hinted at bribery, or something even worse. My hands shook as I traced the property lines on the permit maps, realizing that our fence gate sat exactly where Pinnacle needed open access for their construction equipment. "Walter," I said, my voice breaking with the weight of the realization, "look at this. They've been scheming to take our land since before the first chainsaw arrived." The evidence was staggering, and the implications pointed toward a fully organized conspiracy. We devised a 3-part plan combining Walter's military background with my research skills and modern tech resources. First, I suggested meticulously, documenting every step of reconstructing our fence gate, creating an irrefutable paper trail that would expose any future tampering as outright theft. Walter contributed his tactical insight, emphasizing multiple contingency plans and escape routes in case the perpetrators escalated to violence. Second, I proposed setting up an online group to gather testimonies from other victims of the foe, HOA patrol, assembling a record of harassment that law enforcement couldn't ignore. Third, we would install security cameras around the property to capture any further attacks, building a digital shield to safeguard us in both directions. My investigation into the HOA patrol confirmed what I had suspected. Their operations were completely unauthorized. No state registration, no insurance bonds, no business licenses, no tax filings, nothing that indicated legitimate employment or corporate structure. They existed solely as costumes and con games, a performance designed to intimidate homeowners into surrendering their rights without resistance. I spent hours cataloging their fraudulent credentials, compiling a case file capable of dismantling their claims in court. Yet a lingering question remained. Would we even get the opportunity to testify in court, Or had Pinnacle Development already secured judges and officials just as they had fake security personnel? The online group I created gained traction quickly, spreading our story and the broader conspiracy across digital platforms. Neighbors began sharing experiences of similar harassment, all following the same patterns. Homeowners targeted for fabricated violations that conveniently matched Pinnacle's construction objectives. Multiple families recounted the same fake patrol enforcing non-existent rules, consistently zeroing in on structures that obstructed corporate development. The volume of testimonies made it clear this was a coordinated fraud campaign systematically targeting anyone whose property rights interfered with profit margins. I felt both vindicated by the proof and alarmed by the scale of abuse occurring right under our noses. Real support arrived when I contacted an attorney specializing in land rights and fraud. Sarah Collins, sharp and precise, immediately understood the scope of the conspiracy when she reviewed our documentation. She confirmed our legal standing and advised meticulously documenting every interaction with the fake patrol, crafting an airtight case for both prosecution and civil action. This level of organized fraud typically involves RICO violations, she explained, which can lead to federal charges and serious prison sentences for everyone involved. Finally, some tangible hope emerged that our tormentors could face real consequences. But Pinnacle wasn't going to back down quietly. The fake patrol intensified surveillance, photographing our property and measuring distances as though plotting another attack on our rebuilt gate. Neighbors spotted the same official-looking vehicles scouting the area at various times, clearly collecting intelligence. Walter and I rotated monitoring duties, recording license plates and faces for our growing dossier. The atmosphere felt like a siege, two sides bracing for a confrontation that would determine whether corporate thieves could override American property rights through intimidation and fraud. I checked the security cameras obsessively, knowing the next encounter could decide the outcome. Each morning, Walter meticulously cleaned and maintained his weapon, not in preparation for violence, but as psychological deterrence against anyone observing our home. The ritual served multiple purposes, signaling readiness to defend our rights while generating lawful footage to protect us legally. "They're watching us through binoculars from that blue sedan," he noted during an evening strategy session, pointing to a car 3 blocks away. Was I overreacting, or had this been planned for decades? The permit map marked our fence line in red ink, like a target chosen long before the first fake patrol appeared. Every document uncovered another layer of premeditated conspiracy. That following week, Deborah staged what she called an official compliance inspection, arriving with equipment that looked professional enough to deceive the uninformed. I immediately started live streaming on our community group as their vehicles pulled into the driveway, heart racing as 3,000 viewers joined the broadcast in real time. The viewer count climbed steadily while Deborah and her team unloaded clipboards, measuring tools and documents appearing official from their black SUV. Their presentation radiated authority, from crisp uniforms to confident posture, but Walter and I recognized the act. These were performers playing to an audience that now included law enforcement, media, and thousands of potential witnesses. Deborah delivered her demands as though reading from a manual, her voice carrying the weight of someone convinced she had jurisdiction over our private property. "Surrender that dangerous weapon per Community Safety Code Section 12-7, she declared, brandishing folders that looked authentic at first glance. Walter kept his constitutionally protected firearm plainly visible, producing paperwork from the Veterans Administration proving his lawful ownership beyond any reasonable doubt. "I have authorization for this war relic," he said calmly, projecting quiet confidence without needing badges or permits that, by now, we knew didn't exist. The live stream erupted with comments as viewers recognized the complete lack of real authority behind Deborah's demands. Alerts about fake cops destroying fences scrolled past alongside advice from people far more knowledgeable about the law than our would-be oppressors. From across the street, Mrs. Patterson finally spoke after days of quiet observation. "These people don't represent our neighborhood," she proclaimed loudly enough for the microphone to capture. I literally had to pause and watch in awe as she transformed from a silent observer into a fierce advocate for individual rights. Neighbors began spilling out of their homes, forming an impromptu crowd that surrounded Deborah's group with genuine residents. people who had never supported any HOA patrol enforcement. The balance of power shifted completely as real community members confronted the corporate actors. The turning point came when one of Deborah's aides bent down to pick up a pen he'd dropped, and a folder tumbled from his grasp, scattering papers across our porch. For a brief instant before he could collect them, a bright corporate logo appeared, clearly visible to the camera. "Wait!" I called to the live stream audience, zooming in on the scattered documents. "Did everyone catch that Pinnacle Development logo right there?" The chat erupted as thousands of viewers snapped screenshots, sharing them across platforms before Deborah's group could react. The evidence was undeniable, caught live on camera with thousands witnessing corporate fraud in real time. Deborah's face drained of color as she realized the situation. Her confident demeanor crumbled into panic as she scrambled to help retrieve the papers. The surrounding neighbors pointed, filmed, and shouted, "We see the proof! Corporate thieves exposed!" Meanwhile, the livestream comments exploded with outrage over the link between fake enforcement and development company corruption. Neighbors, who had stayed silent in previous encounters, suddenly found their voices demanding answers about why Pinnacle Development was wielding fake authority to intimidate residents. Word spread, the crowd swelled, and the exposure of visual proof fueled their anger. When Deborah ordered her team to confiscate the weapon, both the live stream audience and local witnesses formed a barrier even thieves couldn't ignore. Walter stood firm, calmly explaining that theft would be a felony under state law. Armed robbery, he clarified, with 3,000 witnesses watching. No one dared commit a televised crime with their faces and license plates being recorded. Chase, one of Deborah's associates, stepped forward, uneasy with the escalating situation. "Deborah, we should leave now," he urged. She snapped back with desperation. "Shut up. We have authorization." The Pinnacle Development logo had already answered that question for everyone watching. The solidarity of the neighborhood during this confrontation felt historic, neighbors standing up to fraudulent authority. I felt a surge of confidence, recognizing the truth and recorded evidence were far more potent than intimidation and fake badges. Multiple residents shared their harassment stories on camera, creating a public record that law enforcement couldn't ignore, even if they wanted to. These testimonies unfolded live, broadcast to thousands, documenting everything for posterity. Mrs. Patterson revealed she had been tracking the fake patrols for weeks, logging vehicles, faces, and demands. "I knew they weren't authorized," she said. "I just didn't know how to fight them until you two showed resistance was possible." When the sheriff's deputy arrived mid-confrontation, he quickly assessed the situation. Walter's right to possess his war relic was affirmed, while Deborah's group had no credentials. The deputy reviewed Walter's Veterans Administration paperwork, confirming the weapon status and noting the corporate connection exposed on the live stream. "Ma'am, what is your relationship with Pinnacle Development?" he asked Deborah, and her stammering reply supplied all the evidence needed for potential charges. Their fake patrol had no authority, just costumes and corporate backing, now revealed under official scrutiny. Chase approached Walter amid the chaos, separating from his group. "Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't know it was wrong," he whispered. Walter nodded wisely, like someone who had seen young men make mistakes in wartime. "You're learning, son. Choose better employers next time." Their retreat was unmistakable, thieves fleeing exposure and legal consequences. Deborah's group hastily packed up, their confidence gone, replaced by sheer desperation. Live stream viewers celebrated in real time, sharing screenshots of the Pinnacle Development logo to record corporate fraud for history. But as they reached their vehicle, Deborah turned back with a chilling look. "We'll return with real authorities," she said. Now her eyes carried a dangerous intensity. The humiliation had transformed her from corporate tool into personal enemy. Exposed on camera, desperate thieves don't simply vanish quietly. At exactly 2:00 a.m. Friday, motion sensors lit the yard with LED security lights, turning night into day. I woke with a jolt, heart racing as our security system activated according to our defensive plan. Walter and I had anticipated retaliation after the public humiliation, desperate thieves trying covert destruction, believing no one was watching. Their professional lock-cutting tools indicated a coordinated assault, aimed at destroying witnesses and property that symbolized resistance to corporate fraud. I grabbed my phone and began live streaming immediately. Surprise! You're on camera! I shouted into the lit yard. Hundreds of viewers joined instantly. The three intruders froze, revealing their professional equipment and coordinated intentions. They had battery-powered saws, lockpicks, and demolition tools, clearly targeting our rebuilt fence and potentially the house to erase evidence of prior attacks. Walter's design worked perfectly. The fence collapsed without injuring anyone, providing dramatic footage of trespass and destruction. The crash echoed through the neighborhood, alerting residents who joined our live stream as witnesses to corporate-sponsored vandalism. Walter emerged carrying an American flag, his M60 visible behind him, creating an iconic tableau. He stood like a soldier defending rights, exuding dignity and authority against the intruders caught destroying private property. "Gentlemen, you're committing felonies at 2 a.m. on private land," he declared, his voice carrying the weight of military service. Live stream viewers erupted with patriotic support, sharing the broadcast across social media faster than any marketing campaign. Comments praised Walter's defense of American land rights, turning our midnight stand into a national symbol of resistance against corporate tyranny. The peak viral moment came when one intruder swore, and Walter immediately corrected him with disciplined authority forged in combat. "Watch your language," he said. "Americans are watching this live, including children who deserve better examples." Viewer count soared past 5,000, 15,000, then $30,000. As the clip went viral across multiple platforms at once, news organizations began requesting the rights to the footage while the confrontation was still unfolding, recognizing a story that wove together land rights, veteran heroism, and corporate theft into gripping television. The faces of the intruders were clearly illuminated by our security lights. Their license plates documented the equipment they left behind, serving as evidence of deliberate crimes committed against American citizens on their own property. During the chaos, Chase separated from the other intruders and approached Walter with sincere remorse that seemed to cut through the older man's military composure. "Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't realize it was wrong," he whispered. Walter's reply reflected the leadership traits that had carried him through combat in Vietnam. "You're learning, son. Choose better employers," Walter said, offering a path to redemption for a young man who'd made terrible choices but still possessed enough conscience to distinguish right from wrong. The interaction humanized both men in front of thousands of viewers, showing that justice can include mercy without compromising principles. Chase's shift from accomplice to contrite witness would prove pivotal in the ensuing proceedings, providing insider testimony about the conspiracy aimed at your community. The footage we captured that night was undeniable and airtight, multiple angles of trespass and destruction that no attorney could explain away, license plates, faces, tools, and dialogue, all documented in high-definition video that would serve as prosecution evidence in federal court. The sheriff's deputy, who responded to our emergency call, arrived to find intruders fleeing and materials strewn across our yard like a crime scene straight out of a television show. Walter and I had secured the digital footage, immediately uploading copies to multiple cloud storage services to prevent any tampering or destruction attempts. The case against Pinnacle Development and their accomplices was now unassailable, backed by live witness accounts from thousands of Americans who had watched corporate fraud unfold in real time. The treat that followed looked exactly as it was. Professional thieves fleeing exposure after their sophisticated operation collapsed under community resistance and documentation. They abandoned costly equipment in their rush to escape, providing additional evidence of deliberate activity that prosecutors could use to increase charges and pursue maximum penalties. The live stream continued broadcasting their frantic departure, license plates clearly visible as they violated multiple traffic laws in a desperate attempt to avoid arrest. My phone buzzed constantly with interview requests from national news outlets, offers from attorneys specializing in corporate fraud, and messages of support from Americans who recognized our confrontation as a defense of principles that applied to every landowner nationwide. Walter sat back at his porch table, the American flag draped behind him like a scene from Revolutionary War paintings, his coffee cup steady in hands that had defended freedom in multiple conflicts. The M60 remained in view, but unthreatening, a symbol. of rights rather than a weapon, representing the principles that separate legitimate governance from fraud. This is how Americans defend their land, he told the livestream audience with law footage and witnesses, not violence. The comment section exploded with patriotic support, veterans sharing their own experiences of defending rights, and experts explaining the charges awaiting anyone who used fraud and intimidation to seize American land. We had them caught red-handed on camera committing felonies. Now the entire country was watching to see how this would end. Residents organized what they called a community testimony review at the site of our destroyed fence gate, transforming our front yard into an impromptu courtroom that drew over 200 people from across the county. They brought folding tables, microphones, and a projection screen powered by portable generators, creating a setup resembling more a political rally than a neighborhood meeting. Local media covered the event as breaking news, recognizing that our fence dispute had evolved into something far larger than corporate fraud. This was American citizens reclaiming their rights from thieves who had hidden behind false authority for far too long. I felt both honored and terrified by the responsibility of representing everyone harmed by Pinnacle Development's systematic theft of land rights through intimidation and fraud. Walter took the microphone with quiet dignity, his voice carrying across the crowd with authority earned through military service. He gestured toward the destroyed gate, which had become a symbol of corporate attacks on individual freedom. I built this fence to honor fallen comrades, he said simply. That M60 represents what we fought for, land ownership rights. The crowd listened in respectful silence, aware they were witnessing living history from someone who had sacrificed for the freedoms they defended today. When he handed me the microphone, my throat felt raw under 200 eyes. I wasn't a soldier, I was a teacher, and my voice trembled as I began describing what we had uncovered about the conspiracy targeting our community. The faces in the crowd mirrored my own anger and resolve. Neighbors who'd suffered quietly finally saw a path to justice. I presented our video documentation, carefully guiding the community through recorded proof of organized scheming that would have impressed law professors. My hands shook slightly as I advanced through slides displaying the midnight raid footage in crystal-clear detail. The projection screen showed professional intruders committing crimes against American citizens on their own property. I had to pause twice as my voice broke with emotion. The sheriff's deputy, who had responded to our emergency calls, confirmed multiple violations of state and federal law, including trespass, destruction, and fraud under color of authority. A city inspector appeared unexpectedly, announcing that our home had never violated municipal codes and that all alleged violations had been fabricated by thieves impersonating government officials. Neighbors nodded gravely as patterns emerged, recognizing similar harassment in their own experiences. The community solidarity formed during this public hearing rested my faith in American democracy and governance. Residents signed petitions demanding prosecution of the fake patrol, the broader conspiracy, and civil damages for destruction and psychological harassment that had terrorized families throughout the area. This wasn't just moral support, but organized action resisting corporate theft. Mrs. Patterson read the names of other victims too intimidated to speak publicly, creating a record of systematic abuse prosecutors could use to build RICO cases against all involved in the conspiracy. The pattern of organized theft was undeniable, documented by multiple witnesses with corroborating testimonies. Each story revealed the same methods, the same fake uniforms, the same coordinated intimidation aimed at breaking families' resistance to corporate land grabs. Have you ever wondered what you would do if your entire community were targeted by organized fraud? An HOA board member who had stayed silent throughout the crisis arrived carrying a small digital recorder that would change everything we thought we knew about the conspiracy. "I recorded everything," she announced to the stunned crowd. "People need to know the truth about what's been happening in our community." Her hands trembled as she connected the device to our sound system, ready to reveal secrets hidden from the community for months. I wasn't sure what to expect, but the tension in her voice suggested revelations that would shock even those of us who had been fighting the fraud from the start. She had been quietly collecting testimony, documenting conversations and meetings that exposed the full scope of organized activity. The woman looked terrified but resolute. like someone finally finding the courage to speak truth to power after months of complicit silence. The audio recording played through our speakers delivered the final, irrefutable proof of conspiracy that would seal the fate of everyone involved in the fraud scheme. Deborah's voice emerged clearly, discussing strategy with Pinnacle Development representatives as if they were partners in organized theft. "These old people just grow gardens and collect Social Security," she said with clear disdain. "They can't fight corporate lawyers or afford the costs that real resistance requires." My chest tightened as disbelief washed over me. How could someone speak so dismissively about citizens she claimed to represent? The community gasped audibly at her callousness, and someone shouted, "Play it again!" The recording continued, revealing worse details. The contempt in her voice was unmistakable, treating her neighbors like obstacles rather than people with rights. The Pinnacle representative responded casually, demonstrating how corporate fraud had become standard practice in their organization. "We're paying top dollar to remove these obstacles," he stated bluntly. "Do whatever it takes, but make sure nothing comes back to our corporate offices." The crowd murmured in outrage as the recording exposed deliberate bribery, fraud, and harassment orchestrated at the highest levels of corporate leadership, carried out with full awareness of its illegality. Multiple homes had been targeted using identical fake authority tactics, with city planning officials also accepting bribes to approve permits and overlook violations. The scale of corruption stretched far beyond our individual case, revealing a network operating undetected by legitimate law enforcement. The casual, offhand tone of their conversation was more chilling than any overt threat, showing people who treated fraud as just another business tool. The board member's recording continued, detailing other victims and schemes that made my stomach churn with anger and disgust. The conspiracy included plans to intensify harassment against families who resisted, involving threats of violence, and property destruction far beyond what we had experienced. Elderly residents and military veterans had been specifically targeted, assumed less likely to challenge fraudulent authority claims. Walter's military background and my teaching career had apparently surprised them, presenting a resistance they hadn't anticipated based on their psychological profiling of potential victims. This enterprise had operated for over a year, successfully, intimidating dozens of families into relinquishing land rights without contest. The most disturbing aspect was their clinical discussion of which families would break first under pressure, treating human suffering like a metric to optimize. During the testimony presentation, the district attorney arrived with state investigators, who had been building their own case against Pinnacle Development for similar thefts in other counties. The recorded conversations supplied the final evidence needed for federal RICO charges capable of dismantling the entire organization and sending everyone involved to prison for decades. "This level of organized fraud constitutes a federal conspiracy," the DA announced. "We now have enough testimony to pursue maximum penalties under both state and federal law." Multiple victims stepped forward immediately, recounting harassment and intimidation following identical patterns across different communities. The DA's presence transformed our neighborhood gathering into an official investigation, giving legal credibility to testimonies that had been dismissed for months as isolated complaints. If Deborah had spoken this way in private, what other schemes had she planned that remained undiscovered? 2 weeks after the community testimony exposed the conspiracy nationally, law enforcement delivered the justice American citizens deserved when their rights were violated by organized theft. Deborah Richardson pleaded guilty to multiple felonies, including conspiracy, fraud, and extortion, accepting a plea deal requiring $50,000 in restitution and full cooperation with ongoing federal investigations. The fake patrol members faced trespass and property destruction charges that would result in prison sentences and permanent criminal records. Executives at Pinnacle Development confronted federal fraud charges that could bring decades of imprisonment and complete annihilation of their corporate empire built on systematic theft of American land rights. Our victory extended far beyond our own fence dispute, establishing a precedent that would protect other families from similar corporate fraud schemes nationwide. Walter and I rebuilt our fence gate with the help of neighbors volunteering their time and skills, creating something stronger and more beautiful than what had been destroyed. We installed permanent security cameras, not for surveillance but for transparency, creating a digital record to deter future attacks while documenting our lawful use of private property. The hand-carved wooden sign we mounted read, Private land protected, fake authority exposed, Constitution defended, serving as a lasting reminder that American citizens retain the power to resist organized theft when united. Our neighborhood. Transformed, implementing security measures through proper channels rather than fraudulent enforcement. Families organized legitimate community watch programs that respected individual property rights while providing collective security against real threats. Chase secured employment with a licensed security company, personally thanking Walter for the life lesson that had prevented him from a destructive path. His transformation from accomplice to law-abiding citizen proved that redemption remained possible if someone chose justice over continued scheming. Several families successfully filed civil lawsuits against the conspiracy, recovering damages that covered repairs, expenses, and compensation for emotional distress from months of systematic harassment and intimidation. These victories provided financial relief while establishing legal precedents to protect other Americans from corporate fraud. Our online community evolved into a resource hub, helping land rights victims across multiple states by sharing strategies and connecting families with attorneys specializing in constitutional and corporate fraud cases. The digital network we had built for our local struggle became a permanent tool for defending American land rights against organized theft. Walter spent quiet evenings on our rebuilt porch, the M60 displayed with dignity alongside an American flag flying over the land he had defended through lawful means. The weapon symbolized principle rather than warfare, representing the duty of every citizen to protect freedom through lawful resistance to tyranny. I watched him with deep respect, understanding why his generation had been called to defend democracy against both foreign and domestic threats. His military service had prepared him for this civilian battle, providing tactical expertise and moral courage that made our victory possible. The resolution of our conflict offered lifelong lessons about defending rights. Daniel learned that freedom demands vigilance against those who exploit authority for personal gain, whether clad in foreign uniforms or corporate suits. The Constitution protects citizens who have the courage to oppose fraud and intimidation, but only if they document testimony, build community support, and engage functioning legal systems. Our success required both Walter's military experience and my civilian skills, proving that effective resistance to tyranny depends on combining different generations and types of expertise. I posted a final video to the 15,000 members who had joined our online community during the battle, sharing lessons learned and encouraging others to defend their rights when faced with similar threats. We discovered that criminals can don uniforms and claim they have authority. On camera, I said, "But here in America, the Constitution shields citizens who confront fraud through testimony and active resistance." The feedback from viewers nationwide showed that our local struggle had struck a chord with Americans facing similar threats to their property rights and personal freedom. True liberty demanded constant alertness and, at times, direct confrontation, but never violence, as long as honest citizens had the proper tools at their disposal. The final symbolic shot that marked our triumph showed Walter sitting calmly, next to his constitutional safeguard, the restored fence standing tall behind him, while security cameras recorded the transparency and accountability that had replaced the fear and intimidation of before. The M60 caught the afternoon sunlight, well-maintained and on display, a solemn reminder of the sacrifices past generations made to secure the freedoms we had defended through lawful civilian action. Our property had become a testament to resisting organized theft, proving that individual Americans can still overcome corporate fraud when testimony, community support, and the law are combined to protect their rights. With Walter's words ringing out, it felt like the storm had finally passed. His remark about exposing thieves with testimony, not bullets, lingered in my mind far longer than any news headline. Because the truth is, the system functions only when we compel it to. Our land remains intact, our rights preserved. But beyond that, our neighbors realized they weren't powerless. Perhaps the real lesson is this: false authority only succeeds if we allow it. If you've stayed with me this far, leave a comment. I want to hear how you would have handled our situation. And if this story resonated and you want to support the channel, you can click that little thanks button below. Stay vigilant, stay free, and take care until the next story reaches you. QA Story signing off for now. But as always, the drama never sleeps.